Hope you are doing well. Today, horror incident about unseen entity or demon. Nick and his father James lived in the bustling city of Manchester, but every now and then they would visit their ancestral village, Nashua. Nashua was a quaint, peaceful village surrounded by vast fields and dense forests. Life in the village was slow-paced, a stark contrast to the fast-moving city life. This time their visit was meant to be a brief respite from the city's chaos, a chance to reconnect with their roots and visit family members still residing there. The journey to Nashua was filled with the usual scenic views of the countryside. Nick, who had always enjoyed these trips as a child, felt a wave of nostalgia as they approached the village. The sight of the old, familiar houses and the scent of the fields brought back memories of simpler times. They were warmly welcomed by their relatives, and soon the village felt like home again. It was an ordinary night when the strange events began. Nick and his father decided to sleep in the backyard of their ancestral home, a place where they had spent many nights gazing at the stars and sharing stories. The cool breeze and the sounds of nature made for a perfect evening. As the night deepened, Nick found himself drifting into a light sleep. Suddenly he was jolted awake by a peculiar sound. It was the rhythmic jingling of a woman's anklet, a sound that seemed out of place in the quiet village night. Nick's heart raced as the sound grew louder and closer. He turned to his father, who was sleeping soundly beside him, and grabbed his shirt in a tight grip. Trying to calm himself, Nick eventually fell asleep again, only to wake up a few hours later with an unsettling feeling. As his eyes adjusted to the darkness, he noticed something terrifying. His father was levitating several feet above the bed. Panic-stricken, Nick began shouting, trying to pull his father down with all his strength. His father's body felt cold and unresponsive. In his desperation, Nick started reciting holy verses he had learned as a child. He repeated them over and over, hoping for a miracle. After what felt like an eternity, his father's body slowly descended back onto the bed. However, James remained unconscious no matter how hard Nick tried to wake him. Nick sprinted downstairs, his heart pounding in his chest. He woke up everyone in the house, explaining what had happened in hurried, frantic words. Together, they all rushed back to the rooftop. After several attempts, they managed to wake James up. James was visibly shaken and pale. When asked what had happened, he recounted a chilling dream. He described how he had been in a dark, foggy place where faceless, headless figures were carrying him on their shoulders, as if he were a corpse. These figures were taking him to an unknown destination. The sheer terror of the dream made him feel as though he had narrowly escaped a horrifying fate. After hearing his father's story, Nick was adamant about leaving Nashua immediately. The once peaceful village now felt ominous and threatening. He insisted that they return to Manchester and never set foot in the village again. James, still shaken by his experience, agreed without hesitation. They packed their belongings hastily and said their goodbyes to their bewildered relatives. The drive back to the city was filled with a heavy silence. Both Nick and James were lost in their thoughts, trying to make sense of the inexplicable events they had just experienced. Once back in Manchester, life slowly returned to normal. However, the events of that night in Nashua left a permanent mark on both Nick and his father. They spoke of it rarely, and when they did, it was with a sense of disbelief and unease. James, a once robust and spirited man, became more reserved and cautious. Nick, on the other hand, developed a deep-seated fear of the supernatural. He avoided any mention of Nashua and refused to visit the village, even during family gatherings and festivals, despite their reluctance to talk about it. The incident gnawed at Nick's mind. He began researching similar occurrences, hoping to find some explanation. He read books on paranormal activities, ancient curses, and ghost stories. He even visited a few local priests and spiritual advisors, seeking their counsel. Most of them dismissed his story as a figment of imagination or a vivid nightmare. However, one elderly priest listened intently to Nick's account and suggested that the village of Nashua might have a history of unexplained phenomena. He advised Nick to perform regular prayers and keep protective charms in their home to ward off any lingering spirits. For a while, Nick followed the priest's advice, and life seemed to regain a semblance of normalcy. But the peace was short-lived. Strange occurrences began happening in their Manchester home. Doors would open and close by themselves, and whispers could be heard in the dead of night. Nick often felt as though he was being watched, especially when he was alone. One night, Nick woke up to the same jingling sound of anklets that he had heard in Nashua. His heart raced as he looked around the room, but there was no one there. The next morning, he found his father's room in disarray, with objects scattered around and furniture overturned. James, however, had no recollection of any disturbance during the night. Realizing that running away was not the solution, Nick decided to confront his fear. He convinced his father to visit a renowned paranormal investigator in the city. The investigator, a middle-aged woman named Dr. Elizabeth, had a reputation for solving mysterious cases and was known for her empathetic approach. Dr. Elizabeth listened to their story without judgment. She conducted a thorough investigation of their home, using various instruments to detect any paranormal activity. She also interviewed James extensively about his dream and the events that followed. After her investigation, Dr. Elizabeth concluded that a malevolent spirit from Nashua had latched onto James during their stay in the village. She explained that such spirits often seek out vulnerable individuals and follow them to new locations, causing distress and fear. Dr. Elizabeth suggested performing a cleansing ritual to rid their home of the spirit. The ritual involved burning sage, sprinkling holy water, and reciting specific prayers designed to banish evil entities. Nick and James participated in the ritual with hope and determination. As the ritual progressed, the atmosphere in the house seemed to lighten. The oppressive feeling that had lingered for months began to dissipate. By the end of the ritual, both Nick and his father felt a sense of relief and peace that they had not experienced since their return from Nashua. With the spirit banished, life slowly returned to normal. The strange occurrences ceased, and the house once again felt like a safe haven. Nick and James continued to follow Dr. Elizabeth's advice, maintaining regular prayers and keeping protective charms in their home. It's my advice, if you ever visit, remember to be careful around the river and the forest. For the spirits that are hungry for fear, always inquire about the house before moving. Keep yourself and others safe from any type of scary activity. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and subscribe.